Let me tell you, start off with a confession. That's always a good way to start. My confession is that I'm here out of ignorance. Ignorance in terms of about 3 or 4 years ago, as I'm watching events, long retired, I realized how little I knew about Islam. So, and so well expressed, Congressman, in terms of a duty to learn if you're in office. Well, I was retired, but I still wanted to learn, and so I started to read. I started to run into guys like Steve and John. I went to classes, I went to other classes, and I started to learn. And I found out the more I learned, the worse it got. And so also as a military guy, and you can't speak as a military guy without referring to Sun Tzu, but he said, know your enemy and know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles without disaster. And so I started to think about that, and that was translated then into later, in fact in my era, to intelligence preparation of the battlefield, which required that you not only know the enemy's strength, number of tanks or whatever, but you also had to know the doctrine that you were up against, because that's how he did things. And so I found as I looked at reports that I could find out who did it, when they did it, where they did it, how they did it, etc. But there was never an answer to why this event occurred. And so I began my study under some very good leadership to try to learn. And I also thought then, as Sun Tzu says, you got to know yourself. The reality is, as I looked, and part of our problem and expressed in different ways, our Western civilization sort of got started in terms of its uniqueness with the Enlightenment. And that was a struggle to deny man's metaphysical or religious orientation and rebuild society based on reason and pursuit of empiricism. And then we went back at the time, looked at the Greek philosophers. A guy named Socrates talked about open debates, etc. And I found today a hardening of anti-Socratic mentality, which is opposed to rigorous public discourse about values and matters of ultimate meaning. Academics no longer strive to expose the truth about alternative ideas. Instead, they praise the virtue of all of them. All of this boils down to the world today of our desire for political correctness and exactly how we have to word things and say things. So it's our hope now with this work that we can back up our intellectual pedigree and begin to stimulate public discussion about this threat that we face. And I would close by saying I'm really not a contributor to this work, but rather a great supporter. But in those terms, I would like to thank those who labored so long, so hard, the intellectual approach to this topic, the research that was done, the assurances of footnotes, and then we'd pass it around and get some additional guidance. Never one hesitation, back to work. So I hope that you all find, as I have found in this process of learning, that we have produced a document that will facilitate that and can be the basis for the open discussion that we need to have to determine the course of action that we can take as we better define this significant enemy.